Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here at Voice of Uganda Radio. My name is Miss Brenda, and I'm excited to have you on board here for Freedom at Hand. So thank you so much for spending the first couple of hours of your morning with us. Hopefully everyone, I keep saying morning because it's morning here, but I know that it's afternoon and evening in some of the time zones that we're coming into right now. So I thank you so much for joining in and being a part of our day here at Voice Uganda Radio. I'm going to make a couple of announcements before I go into our show for today. I just want to let you know that Anna Adek, the President-elect Guild there at McCary University, and Dorothy Bryant, who joins me on Freedom at Hand here on Sunday mornings, will be joining in on the second half of the show. So for the first half, I'll be able to go through all the information that I want to share, and then they'll come in and we'll have more of a discussion in it the second half. Please feel free to call in at any point in time that you want to. You don't have to wait till the second half to be a part of the show. You can call in at any time during the 2-hour show that you would like to. So once again, thank you so much for being on board. We have, FADU is doing very well. Remember the organization, FADDU.org. We still need you to go out there and sign up and become a member of FADU. I made comments earlier about the fact that we will have special emails and things that will go out later on, and those things will only go out to FADU members. It's information that we don't feel like we need to share with our entire radio listening audience. So if you want to be a part, once we start sending those emails and different things that are going to be happening there in FADU, tying it to the United States government with Senator Coons here, you really need to go out there and register and make sure you're a part of that so that you don't miss any of that information once we start circulating those things out there. The website again is FADDU.org. Please go out there and continue to register and be a part of that growth and that movement that's going to be happening, once we kick that off a little more. We're going to talk to Anna a little bit when she comes on later on about the students. We are doing an essay program here. Purdue will be the sponsor of that essay program. Everything is being written up now, and it'll probably be on the website within the next month, but we want to start to make the announcements now for any students only in Uganda, and we will eventually spread that out to other parts, but in Uganda right now, because that is where we're sensing that there's a problem and there's a need for the students there with some of the demands that are being made on them for school fees there. We're going to have an essay contest. It'll be every semester. You can write an essay, and we will put a topic out there so you'll know what the essay needs to be about. And we will choose from those students. And we're not going to just choose like first, second, and third prize. We're going to choose, a few so that everybody will get some sort of help with helping them with their school fees there at the university. That will only be the only people that will be allowed to submit those essays are the students that are a member of FADU. So you will have to be a member of FADU.org in order to participate in that and in order to receive help with your school fees for that semester. I know a lot of you that are out in the diaspora. I know a lot of you are paying school fees for your family members back home. So you may want to encourage the youth that you are providing monies for and that you are helping as well, to let them know, go out there and register on Purdue.org. When we start up that essay contest, they can enter into that for a chance to win monies towards helping them pay for their school fees for that quarter or that semester. And we will have Anna Deck will work with us a little bit on, as we get closer, passing out some flyers there in Uganda as well, to let the youth know to get on board, because we've got to help. Wherever we can help, we've got to help. And right now, this is a big need. We know there's a lot of great needs in Uganda right now, from the teachers to the lecturers to everything that's going on, even with the government right now out of money and fundings. It just continues to snowball into this problem that continues to get larger and larger every week. But this is an area where our hearts are at, because we know that the youth are the leaders of today in Uganda. we know that they all see their education as being very, very important and vital to them moving forward. Maybe not in this government, but in the one to follow. So we need to continue to support them. We need to allow them to know that we are behind them, that we hear their voices, that we know what's going on, and that we're here to help in whatever way we can. So keep that in mind, all of you in the diaspora, that you might have family members that you may want them to come on board. They have to be at least 18 and above to be a part of it. But we want to at least start to make the announcements about that so that we can get as many people on board as possible. But I thank all of you who are part of the DO already for your membership. And I thank you so much for really being a part of Voice Uganda Radio. This is a wonderful platform, and I know that each and every week the numbers continue to grow. So thank you so very much for your participation. We know that we have been very needed in the community because of the numbers of people that tune in from week to week and as we continue to grow. So thank you so very, very much for that. As you know, I had problems last week in my studio, but Voice Uganda keeps working with me, trying to get me in sync. And, of course, every now and then we have to purchase a few new things to get ourselves up and running because those of you know that technology changes. But I appreciate you for your patience, and I appreciate you for coming back this week to be a part of Freedom at Hand, even though I had all the difficulties last week. We are going to talk about a great leader who didn't live long. And we know this to be true because of most of the iconic leaders that have risen up in their days to make a change in their government, to make a change and stand for freedom, for liberties, for equal rights for all. These people stand alone sometimes. These people can rally and get people in with them sometimes. But these people often lose their lives because whenever there's a threat to anything that's in progress now and moving forward, people don't want that. Governments don't want that. Leaderships don't want that. And so they shut it down. But does that mean that we continue to be silent? Or does that mean that we continue to stand up and fight for our rights? I feel like the government in Uganda has done this now to the youth and to those in Uganda with the public management bill that they put forward. There's always ways to shut people down, to keep them at bay so that they don't continue causing friction and problems for everyone else. It's like a fire. If you can contain a fire when it first starts, chances are no one saw the fire and you can put the fire out pretty quick. That's what the sitting government does right now in Uganda. There's a lot of small fires burning all over the place, but they put them out and they quiet them out pretty quickly before anyone notices it or before it can spread any farther. But every now and then, you've got to get people on board and you've got to rally because even though they may smother out and put out these small fires, it doesn't mean that you don't continue to try. It doesn't mean that you don't continue to fight. It doesn't mean that you don't continue to move forward. And the leader that I'm going to be talking about today, Nathaniel Turner, better known as Nate Turner, he was born in the 1800s here in the United States of America. And of course, most of you who've listened to Freedom at Hand, you know in the 1800s, we were still in slavery. His grandmother was taken from the shores of Ghana and brought to the United States as a slave. It's interesting because not only was Nate Turner's grandmother taken from the shores of Ghana, but Harriet Tubman, her grandfather, was taken from the shores of Ghana. So we have great people in the African community that rose to greatness when they came to the United States into slavery, which tells me that the fighting spirit of the African people is there. The fighting spirit of the Ugandan people are there. Because even though most of you know the majority of the slaves that were here in America came from the shores of Africa, these are great people and great leaders. And I'd like to think that those great people and great leaders that are going to rise up for a new day in Uganda are there. And a lot of these leaders, these iconic leaders that I share with you, they're not just stories to entertain. To me, they are ways of igniting those fires in Uganda, in those in the diaspora, for the cause and the way that we all need to move forward. They're not just stories to just kind of entertain you while you have your coffee or your beer or your whatever you're doing. They're to show you the spirit that lives within us, that lives within all of us. We all have a fighting nature within inside of us that says, I won't be treated this way. I don't believe in what's happening to me, and I'm going to stand up for my rights regardless. And we have to remember that, because we get so comfortable in our homes, we get comfortable in our lives, we start to accept things around us. And when we start to accept those things around us, that's where those little fires get put out one at a time. And we cannot allow that to continue to happen, especially now, especially in today, here in Uganda. We have to continue to make our voices heard. And these stories are here to bring hope, to bring a sense of we can do this, to bring a sense of we're not alone, to bring a sense of uniting. Because we've talked about that a lot here on Voice of Uganda, uniting together, because that's what makes us strong. You heard me talk about it last week, about the fear of a wild animal, a wolf or a wild dog, that when if it senses fear in you, it will attack and kill you. But if it doesn't sense that fear in you and you stand your ground, even though you may be a little afraid or timid, it will back off and it will run away. So we need to stand firm. We need to stand our grounds, and we need to get away from the fear factor and allowing that to rule our lives. Because as long as there's fear, the person who is dictating that fear or ruling within that fear will always rule. He will never be threatened. He will never feel a need to move aside or to do anything different than what he's doing. Because if he sees that what he's doing is working, he's going to continue to do that. And if you continue to allow him to see that what he's doing is working, he will continue to do that. And he will continue to keep the Ugandan people where they're at. So these stories are to change that, to give hope to the people, to help you to understand that you can rise up against anything. That most of the people that rose up, the leaders that I've talked about here at Freedom at Hand, they were against the same type of obstacles that you are against there, that you are fighting against there in Uganda, that those of you that are in the diaspora see and know a need for change for. So we need to keep that in mind with a lot of the people that I share and their stories that we bring up. Nate Turner, what he did was, he was born in 1800. He died in 1831. So as you can see, he was only 30 years old. But one of the things he understood and he knew during his time here on earth was the treatment of slavery was wrong. A lot of things that were happening to slaves were wrong. The women were raped all the time and brutalized. Children were beaten. The men were beaten. The working conditions were horrific. Sometimes they didn't even have food. A lot of times, it's a joke now in the American community, but a lot of the traditional foods that we eat were foods that were thrown out from the kitchen. Like when they cleaned a pig, they didn't want the feet, they didn't want the ears, they didn't want the tails, and they didn't want the intestines. So African Americans learned, well, in slavery days, they learned how to cook those things because that was the only food they had. So we lived our lives off of the things that they did not want to eat. And we learned to make them and prepare them in such a way that even now in our American history, those are the foods that we still traditionally eat because those are considered our traditional foods. Not realizing that those were foods that were thrown out for, in the waste. And we just learned to prepare them and make them so that we wouldn't starve. I think a lot of that has happened with Ugandans now inside Uganda. They are finding ways to survive off of whatever means or however they can. Is it always comfortable? Is it always good? Is it always what they want? Probably not. But at some point in all of our lives, we have to find a way to continue to survive. And I believe that that's what's happening inside Uganda, in the Ugandan community. Because we know this from the teachers and a lot of their testimonies and a lot of the things that they've shared. But what he did was he was an African American slave who led a slave rebellion in Virginia in 1831. He knew that what was happening to them was not right. And he knew that if they continued on the path that they continued on, that the whites or the slave owners or the masters would continue to treat them the way in which they treated them. That nothing would change and nothing would be any different than what it was at the present time. The same thing is happening there with Uganda, is what we talk about all the time. If you allow the government to continue to treat you and do the things to you and silence your voices one voice at a time, they will continue to do what they're doing. If you start to rebel or have a revolution that you all rebel and you stand up for your rights and the direction in which you want to see the country go, the government has to pay attention to that. Is this peaceful in any way? Will there be no violence? Well, we can't say that, because in every situation, no matter where you look at in history, any group of people that have rebelled for their rights there's always been hurt, there's always been torture, and there's always been killings. And that is very, very unfortunate. I would love to be able to go back in history and say that this happened and no one ever got hurt. This happened and no one was ever scarred emotionally from it, or that they were victorious without many losses or many casualties. But as we know, from Gandhi's area to the fight there in South Africa to the fight here in the United States of America, many great, great people lost their lives. But did they lose their lives in vain is what we have to ask ourselves today. Nat Turner, did he lose his life in vain? And the answer to that would be no, because as I go through the story of what happened to Nat Turner here in the United States of America in 1800s, he became an icon long after he was gone, and he was the catalyst for a lot of change that took place later on down the road. Because in 1831, when he lost his life and he was 30 years old, it's interesting that Abraham Lincoln was also around and understood and knew what was going on and what was happening during this time. So he even fed off of that, and that fueled the fire in him to know that what was happening to the slaves was wrong. And the only way to correct it was going to be the abolishment of slavery. So you never know who's watching. You never know who's paying attention, and you never know who's going to be affected by you becoming a hero in what you believe and what you think and the iconic movement that you move forward for the people. Because what Nat Turner did, like so many others in slavery days, they forgot about themselves and they were more focused on others. And I have to ask that question to those who are in the diaspora and those who are still in Uganda. Where is your focus today? And where do you want your focus to be? And sometimes all we have to do is change our focus and our mindset. That energy is contagious, because sometimes focusing on one thing as a group or as a unity, that focus changes the trajectory of how that outcome is, or how that outcome grows into something that we can all wrap our arms around and say, yes, 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 this is what we want and this is the direction we want to move in. So we have to remember that the power of change can sometimes just come in changing and shifting our focus on what it is that we're trying to do and what it is that we're trying to change. So this morning I ask all of you, what is your focus? And what is it that you're wanting to see change? And what are you doing to see that that comes about? Because if you don't stand for something, then you stand for nothing, and we all perish. We all perish because, the Bible even tells us the greatest of all things is faith, hope, and love. And that hope is what I'm talking about. What are you focused in on? Where's your hope? Where does it lie? Does it lie for the Ugandan people? And if it does, what are you doing to move forward to bring about change? Because one of the things you need to understand is you may be one person, but you never know the impact that you may have on hundreds around you that are watching or that have heard about your story. So we need to keep that in mind with things. And that is a message I sent out to the parliament there in Uganda. The sitting president in Uganda he doesn't make changes to the laws by himself. He's getting help somewhere to make these changes. Are you being a part of that help? Or are you moving away from that so that you're not a part of moving forward a government in which you don't even participate in or that you don't even stand behind? So every power, we give our power away. And the question is, where are we giving our power away? And who are we giving our power away to? And I would say that those in government in Uganda are giving their power away, and they're giving their power away daily. The president has the same tactics. He's doing the same things over and over and over again to the Ugandan people. And what are you doing to make that change? Are you participating and just being a part of that, or are you moving away from that? We're going to talk a little later on, especially when Anna Odette get on, about Miriam Matemba and the article that she just put in the Observer yesterday about the youth and about things that's going on. And one of the things I love and admire about her is how she talked about in 2003, when the president was wanting to make these changes in elections so that he could sit for more terms. There would be no term limit as to how long he could sit into office and whatever. She was removed from her position at that time because she didn't stand for that. She no longer wanted to be a part of that. She didn't want that to be the part of her legacy. And what I'm afraid of with those in parliament is they're selling their souls right now for a job or for a position. Because you got to stand up and say, I will not vote for this. This is not right. Even if I lose my position, even if I have to move out of this arena and find a job somewhere else. And that's what you need to do, because right now you're fueling this man and you're giving him the power to make all of these changes in your life, even though you don't approve of them or even though you don't accept them. Not realizing and not understanding that the same power that you continue to give this president, he will eventually use it against you. Point being taken that right now, Parliament, those in Parliament are not even being paid. Government is getting short on money. The same way he treated the teachers, to say, I don't have the money. I'll try to come up with the money, but there's no money here now. And now he's making excuses even after they've come back as to why they can't get paid, and punishing those who stepped out against, that were a part of the teacher strike there. The same thing's going to happen to you in Parliament. No one in Uganda is safe. And I don't know why those in leadership positions in Uganda continue to feel as if they are safe. This man has shown you who he is. Believe him. He's not going to change his stripes today or tomorrow. He has shown the Ugandan people who he is time and time and time again. And you continue to fall into his same traps, his same promises. And yet he treats you no differently than the very people that are in the midst of the fire at the present time, which when the teachers were going through their strike, those in leadership positions needed to rise up and they needed to help. Instead, they folded and they bowed to this president, and now he's making you guilty and feel sorry and punishing you even more for what you did. He has taken the power away from the teachers. And the same thing now is going to start to happen in Parliament. And do we feel sorry? I don't feel sorry for any of them, because if the government has to shut down at his own hands, then that's what needs to happen. Because if those in Parliament don't get paid, they step aside and say, we're not coming to work because we're not getting paid. Well, then you take away his power a little bit. And maybe he will be his own destruction. Maybe he will be the one that destroys himself. Because eventually with this type of mentality and the things that he's doing, there is no way that he will continue to have the strong force of people behind him if he continues to do the things that he's doing. He may be the destruction of himself without us ever coming in and destroying him. Because you got to make a stand for what you believe in, and you got to make a stand for what is right. You have to stand on something. Your principles, your morals. Where is your focus? What are you focusing in on? Because I'm telling you, the evil that lives in Uganda, in this presidency and in this regime, is still there. It will trickle down into his military eventually. Because if there is no money, there will continue to be no money. If he's not getting funding from somewhere, there is no funding. And I don't know anybody in the global world that wants to work for anyone for free. Broken promises are broken promises. They're empty. There's nothing there. It doesn't feed you at the end of the day. It doesn't pay your children's school fees. It doesn't pay your bills. It pays nothing. It's totally empty. So we've got to put our focus where it needs to be. And this is why we talk about uniting here at Voice of Uganda Radio. Because right now people look at the change of regime or the change of government there as something that's overwhelming and something that can't be done, or something that they want to leave to the hands of a few people, and people don't want to get involved. But I say that sometimes your involvement doesn't have to be as great as others, but you still need to be involved to some degree. You still need to be involved. So what Nate Turner understood was that the way they were being treated was not going to change. Slaves were going to continue to be treated the way slaves were treated, as long as they continued to be submissive and not stand up and not try to rebel or to fight in some sort of way. Because if you don't give someone a reason, if you don't fight, then they think, well, I can just rule, and you make it very easy for them to do it. I think a lot of what the president is doing there in Uganda right now, the government that works underneath him are making it very easy for him to do what he wants to do. You're not giving him a fight. There's no friction. You guys just go in there and vote and do what he wants to do. So he's pretty happy. There's no reason for him to feel like anything needs to change. This is what Nat Turner understood in slavery. If they allowed their masters and their slave owners to continue to treat them the way they were treating them, they would continue to treat them that way, and nothing would ever change. The tortures would continue, the hurts would continue, and the people would never have a freedom. They would continually be treated the way that they were treated. So what he did was he rallied up and he got the people behind him. He started having the conversations. This can't happen. We can't live this way. We have to do something about this. We have to start fighting for our rights. If we don't start fighting for our rights, we will continue to be treated this way. Now, what if he never had that mindset? What if he never ever stood up and said, we will no longer live this way? Do you think in the United States of America that African Americans would have the freedoms and the liberties and the justices that we have today? You know, sometimes when you go back in history and you look at things and you say, if it were not for this one individual, because we're talking about him in the very, very early stages. We're not talking about Dr. King who came later, Rosa Parks who came later. We're not talking about all the iconic leaders that came later to continue the struggle and continue to fight. We're talking about the very, very early stages of slavery. If the slaves did not start to rebel, where would we be today? And this is what I want the Ugandans to know, and those of you in the diaspora. The fight has to start somewhere. The conversation has to start somewhere. People have to start to rise and say things are not right, regardless of the outcome. In Uganda, it may be that you lose your jobs. It may be that you don't get paid. It may be other things that may happen. You may be put in jail or tortured or whatever. But we still have to start to have the conversations because it's contagious. And the reason I say that is when people, you never know how everyone around you feel until someone starts to make the move. This is what happened with Nat Turner. He made the move to say we've got to start having the conversation regardless. When he started saying we've got to have the conversation regardless, he was surprised at how many people supported him and how many people rallied behind him, because he wasn't the only one that felt that way. We've got to start having the conversations. We've got to start talking. We've got to start communicating, because you're not the only one that feels the way that you feel. I know right now there are people in Parliament that there's probably a lot of you that are standing on the same side of the law to say this is not right. What are we doing to make a change? And start having the conversations among yourselves. You don't have to have the conversation with everybody. Nat Turner did not just say, I'm having a meeting of all the slaves, and this is what we're going to do. He started talking one at a time to people. He started convincing people one at a time. We've got to do something. We've got to do something. We can't live this way. We can't be tortured this way. One person at a time, he built up his army. Don't be afraid to have the conversations. Even if it's someone that you're very close to now, have the conversation with them. Because that person that you're very close to, I guarantee you, they're close to someone else. and they will have the conversation with someone they're close to. And now all of a sudden you have 4 people. You started with 2, and now you have 4. And from the 4, now you have 6. And from the 6, now you have 8. Because you start that chain of people who have like minds, who are moving in the same direction and understand that there has to be change. You may not make a movement right away to say this is what we need to do, but you start to build a network of people with like minds, with like interests that know that what's going on, there has to be some sort of change. Who do we link to that is already organized to make us even bigger? Parliament, you have to start having the conversation. Teachers, you have to start having the conversation. Students on the campuses, you have to start having the conversations. Even those of you in the military, even those of you who are police officers, you've got to start having the conversation. Start finding out who is thinking in the same the same mindset for change. Before you know it, you're going to have students, you're going to have people of parliament, you're going to have people in the military, and you're going to have ordinary citizens in Uganda that are going to start to come together and start to realize just how powerful you are. And just how much you can start to stand and you can start to make a difference in this government to say, we don't want to be treated this way anymore. You can no longer continue to amend the Constitution for one person, that it's all in the favor of him and his family, not in favor of the Ugandan people. But what I'm saying is, if you learn nothing else from what I'm saying here today on Nat Turner, understand that he was one man who knew that they had to rebel. And what he did was he shared that with his closest friend. And his closest friend shared that with his closest friend. And they grew and they grew and they grew. And this is where his rebellion came in to be, and there in Virginia. This is some of the things that happened. It's unfortunate, like I said in the very beginning. Sometimes these things are a bloodbath and they never end the way that you think they need to end. But hasn't the Ugandan government already started the bloodbath there in Uganda, in the treatment of the Ugandan citizens? The way he beats and treats the students, tear gassing people all over the place, the torture houses that we already know exist there in Uganda. I mean, really, hasn't the bloodbath already started? So all we're saying is stand up for your rights to say you can no longer do this and no longer treat us this way. Because I promise you, the man has already shown you who he is, and he will continue to show you who he is. The bloodbaths have already started in Uganda. We know this on the outside. We know that these things are happening. The governments outside of in our areas, whether it be the United States of America, whether it be Canada, whether it be the UK, Germany, no matter where you're at, they're not going to start to pay attention to this until we start to make a loud noise. Right now, things are happening on a quiet scale. And the government's doing everything possible to contain those things within the walls of Uganda. But we know little by little the information starting to seep out. This is why Fadu.org is important. Because when this information starts to seep out, with these signatures that we have on this platform, we go to the United States government, to Senator Coons, who sits on the subcommittee for foreign affairs in Africa, and we say, this is what's happening. These are our signatures. These are the people that validate that these things can no longer happen and there has to be change in that country, and we start to make our voices heard. This is why that is important. This is why you continue to hear people talk about Fadu. This is why it's important for us to unite. We may not all stand on the same principles right now, my fellow Ugandans, but we all know that what is happening in the country right now is wrong. We may not all agree on the people who are in leadership, the people who will lead the government. There may be a lot of things that we still don't stand eye to eye on, but let's stand eye to eye on what we do believe is wrong. And what we believe is wrong today in Uganda is the torturing and the things that are happening to the Ugandan citizens is wrong. And what are we going to do to move that forward? How are we going to be the difference to make sure that their voices are heard? Now, the rebellion that he started up against those slave owners in Virginia, they killed 60 whites. They killed 60 whites, and it wasn't just the slave owners. Sometimes it was their wives, and sometimes it was their children. You never want to hear about women and children being a part of brutality in this way. But when you're fighting for your freedoms, sometimes innocent people get in the way of the freedom fight. Did these women and children deserve to die? No. But we have children that die in Uganda every day by gunshots and things that are happening there in Uganda as people continue to fight for their rights there. We have women who are raped. We have women who are beaten. We have women who are tortured. So sometimes in the movement forward, it is never a pretty sight. And we would never want to think that women and children get hurt in these battles. But the true fact is that it does happen. It happened in the 1831 when they started to stand up for their rights. It's happening right now in Uganda. And, we would like to think that we can change that in some sort of way, but we can't. And I talk about it and my voice changes because it is a sad state of fact and a sad state of affairs that this does happen. So when they went about what they did is they started freeing slaves, and they started going into the homes and they were killing the family members. And as they freed people, they became bigger and bigger and larger, and they went throughout the territory, killing and freeing anyone that would come and be a part of them and move forward, fighting for their rights, that they were not going to be treated the way they were treated. They would no longer live to be the women to be raped, the children to be beaten, the men to be killed and whipped to death in front of their families, selling their loved ones off into slavery in other areas to separate them, to keep them obedient to their masters. It went on and on and on. They went through these killings and these beatings, and they killed 60 or more of these family members. The sad thing is, the good news about what Nate Turner did is he made an awareness to the slaves that the power that we can change the way the way that we're being treated. That we no longer have to be treated the way that we're being treated. That if we let them know that we're angry and we're upset, they will now have caution in the treatment of us and the way in which they handle us. Nate Turner lost his life. He was hung, and he was left there in the city square for all to see. That this is what happens when you rebel. Because of this, once the military got this under control and stopped the killings and felt like they had rounded up everyone who was a part of this, 200 blacks were killed, and these were innocent blacks. They had nothing to do with it, but it was a rebellion against the military now for what had been done, because no one had ever risen up to fight or raise their hand at a white man, ever. And this was the first incident where whites were killed by the hands of blacks. So, of course, the pain that they experienced through this was horrendous. And that's what he wanted them to feel. He wanted them to know what it was like for them as slaves when they were killed. Because why should the slave owners, why should the whites feel that they had no emotions? And they had no compassion, and they had no love for the people that they were killing. So in turn, they showed them what it feels like to kill women, to kill children, and to kill the whites. So the anger, as you can imagine, was overwhelming for the military when they went and they tortured these 200 blacks. They didn't just shoot them. A lot of them were tortured to death out of the anger and the frustration of what this one man had done. But what it did was it made the situations that they went through more real. That these people, although they were colored and although they were black, they still had emotions, they still had feelings. They cried when their loved ones were beaten. They cried when their loved ones died. They cried when their loved ones were separated from them. A lot of what happens in the Ugandan military now and with the sitting president, he has separated himself from the emotions of what the Ugandan people feel. He is no longer a part of the hurt that he causes, the pain that he causes, the frustration that he causes. He has totally separated himself from that. So he feels that what he does to you is justifiable, and he feels like he can do it because no one is telling him that he can't. This is what Nate Turner his fight and his struggle was all about. These people continue to do what they do to us as slaves because they are disconnected from the emotional side of who we are. The same thing is happening with the president. He has separated himself from the Ugandan people. He doesn't care if you don't have sewer or you don't have running water. He doesn't care if you don't have electricity. He doesn't care how you're going to feed your families. He doesn't care if you have school fees. He doesn't care if you have money to pay your bills. He doesn't care if there's going to be food on your table that night or not, or where the money's going to come from to do it. He doesn't care that your loved ones are dying because of the hospitals are all ran down. Even the government hospitals are not functioning and not working. The man does not care. He has separated himself from the Ugandan people. He sees himself as the ultimate power. He continues to hire people to make sure that he stays in power. His family and him are the only ones that are safe in Uganda. I tell you, those of you who are in parliament, you are not safe in his regime. None of you are safe. If you do anything to rise up against him, he will make you fall. He has separated himself from the Ugandan people, therefore he feels no remorse for anything that you go through. He sits and he listens because that's what he needs to do when he's in the arena at a speaking engagement or an event or something like that. But when he leaves those events, he doesn't know who you are. He doesn't know how you suffer. He doesn't know what's going on in your life, nor does he care. What Nate Turner did in the 1800s for slaves is to bring awareness to the whites that we are human, that what you are doing to us is not right, and that we will no longer stand up and allow this to happen. The people who died and lost their lives, the people who continued to lose their lives shortly after that, it was a terrible thing. Now, they did take them to trial, but you have to understand, these people were still slaves. So how much, really, how much were they really saved?
We have a call.
So let me go ahead and take this call. Hi, caller, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Miss Brenda. Thank you so much. I'm the usual suspect. I always call your program. And what a wonderful topic you have today. It really touched my heart when you mentioned that what's going on in Uganda, that Museveni himself, I never call him President Museveni, I always call him Museveni, that he has detached himself from the people and suffering of Ugandans, what Ugandans go through. Definitely you are right, because there is no way this man can see his people suffering the way they are, and he believes that he's there to lead them or to protect them, to save their lives. The way people are dying every day in the hospitals, and when people raise their voices to come to the streets, the way they are treated, the way they are tear gas, the way they are shot using live ammunition, that is detachment from what's going on and the suffering of the Ugandan people. Ugandans should know that the government we have, as Mrs. Brenda has said, there is a lack between the governed and those governed, the governing us and those who are governed. The only way Museveni could understand and come back to reality is to know that if any of his family members is killed by violence, any of his children or any of his, I'm not advocating to do this, but what I'm saying that will bring his the reality back to him, because right now he sees a dead body and he doesn't care. He sees on TV, oh, they are the one causing trouble again. I don't care. And his legacy, as you said, that the slave and the guy who started the rioting to free the slaves, when he was hung, they left his body for others to learn lessons. That is exactly Museveni's mentality. You kill, leave the bodies there, and let others learn a lesson that if you do this, this is what's going to happen. I was looking at a video, a YouTube documentary about Patricia Lumumba, what exactly happened, what those white Belgians were doing to people from Zaire, or now called Democratic Republic of Congo, how they were tortured, how they brought guns and started shooting people, because the people in Zaire or Democratic Republic of Congo came out to show their displeasure that we are not supposed to be treated this way. And when they came out, exactly what is happening in Uganda, exactly what happened in Congo. We've seen it over and over and over. What happened in South Africa during apartheid, when people came on the street, we saw the army, we saw the police, we saw the tear gas, live bullets. Exactly, that is what's happening in Uganda right now. It is very, very sad that Museveni went to South Africa and bought all these trucks. Everything you see, the army trucks, the tear gas trucks, they all came from South Africa. That's where they came. Museveni bought them from there and brought them in Uganda. And this man is keeping telling Ugandans that he's patriotic. Oh, he's Pan-Africanist. Museveni, you are not. Museveni, you are a killer. And I want to emphasize that Ugandans, we should know that Museveni and the people of Uganda, we are completely detached. That's why he's killing us with no emotions. That's why he's torturing us with no emotions. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to go and see the documentary about Patricia Lumumba. We put it on Facebook, on our Facebook page. It is showing exactly what happened during that time is exactly what is happening right now in Uganda. And Museveni is there telling us, these white people, they are the one who caused all these problems. You go and see yourself. Exactly what happened during that time is exactly what's happening. The same tactics Museveni is using. But when he's addressing the nation, he says, oh, the colonialism did this. But he's doing exactly the same thing. There is no attachment. He has detached himself to the people he's supposed to be leading. Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda.
Thank you so much, too, caller. Thank you so much for participating in that. The caller's absolutely right, and he understands it from that perspective. One of the things here at Voice of Uganda Radio is to bring awareness to people, because a lot of times we go about living our lives and we separate ourselves out from the atrocities and things that are happening to other people. We need to be reminded of what this fight is and what this fight is all about, and that this is not going to get any better. You know, like he's saying, the video to go out there on Voice Uganda Radio Facebook page and view that video. We have to put this information out there. We have to let the Ugandan family know what we are up against. Everyone wants to just sit back in their easy chair and think that this is all going to go away. This is not going to go away. It would not have gone away in slavery in the 1800s if it were not for the rising up and having a revolution against and rebelling against the whites. It would not have gone away in South Africa if they did not rebel and start to fight for their rights. And the same thing in India and so many other countries where people have had to stand up and fight for their rights. It's interesting that he brought up the South African piece, because that is where we want you to understand and what we want you to know. Fighting and standing up doesn't mean you're going to go out and do something horrific and terrible or whatever. These people just stood up for what they knew was the right thing to stand up for. The fight became its own fight and became its own war, but the people just decided that they were tired and this was no longer acceptable, and this was no longer the way that they wanted to live their lives or be treated. And there comes a time when people have to get tired, and we have to say, how do we unite? He's also right in saying, like what I was just saying before the caller came on, was that the government is so detached from the people that the president does not see the people as having emotions and feelings. He does not understand the hurt and the pain that comes to those families when their family members are killed or shot or left laying in the streets dead. And he won't even allow them to come in and get the body because he wants them to lay there as an example. He is very, very attached from the emotional side of what he's doing to the Ugandan people. He's very, very detached. And that is a very sad state of affairs when you have a president who is in charge of his people, who has disconnected from his people in such a way that the only thing that matters to him now is the power that he has, the power that he wants to continue to have and continue to hold on to at any cost. And when I say at any cost, that's what I mean. We're talking about the bloodbath of what happened here with Nat Turner, but the bloodbaths are going to be there, and it's unfortunate that this power, we talk a lot about fear on this program, and on my other program, we talked a lot about why we felt like Ugandans weren't coming forward and weren't stepping forward because of fear, and the fear that has been placed there. But can I tell you something, my fellow Ugandans? No matter where you're at, whether you're in the walls of Uganda or outside, all of these people that rose up against their governments had fear. All of these people who rose up against their government were tired, frustrated, and knew that there had to be change. And the only way that there was going to be change was that they had to become the change. Please don't think that these people were like, they woke up one morning and said, I'm going to go do this. These people had to convince themselves. These people were scared. These people knew that their lives, they could lose their very lives. But they were willing to lose their lives instead of continuing to live the way that they lived. And look at us. I'm going back into the 1800s, bringing out people who were iconic leaders, activists at that particular time in life. No one is ever forgotten. Those who fight on the side of justice are never forgotten. Here we are in the 21st century, and we're still going back to the 1800s to liberate us and to continue to bring us forward. The stories are there, and the stories need to be told. And not only to the Ugandan people, but those who are suffering and those who are tortured and those who are going through difficult times now in their own countries. And, this was not a great thing. I mean, you would hate to think that innocent people lost their lives, but innocent people lose their lives every day in all sorts of ways. We are not going to be able to save the world through change. Change brings about heartache, and it brings about pain, and it brings about frustration. But the change that it brings about is change for the better and change for good. Now, because of what he did and because of the hero that he was, I mean, I talked to you about Harriet Tubman a while back and how people saw her, they called her a woman called Moses because they felt like she was there to lead them into the promised land. She was there to lead them into something greater. A lot of the slaves back in the 1800s were very, very religious people. They were very religious people. They prayed to their gods. They trusted in God. They knew that they would be victorious someday. When, they did not know, but they knew that they would have victory because they knew that their God would someday come through and rescue them. So when people rose up to be leaders, they became, they would give them biblical names. And Nat Turner, they looked to him as a prophet. They felt like he was a prophet from God because he shared with them dreams that he had had and things that were showing him the way in which they needed to be and what they needed to do. And so people trusted in him and they believed in him and they stood by him. Even though they knew that they may lose their own lives, they still stood by him. Now, history goes to show from the history that was taken down during his journal and everything. History goes to show, because he was interviewed by an attorney before they took his life. History goes to show that he only worked with 4 people that instigated this whole thing. A slave called Henry, a slave named Hank, a slave named Nelson, and a slave named Sam. Those were the 4 that started to compile other people up to do this. The 200 people that lost their lives innocently had nothing at all to do with anything. But because of this, and because people didn't talk, and because people didn't say anything, a lot of what they didn't realize is the reason people didn't talk or say anything is because they really didn't know anything. They kept this conclusive into a small group of people. Now, there were others who joined in, but the bulk of it were these 4 individuals that did all of this, 5 including Nate. 45 slaves were accused of being a part of this movement, this revolution to kill, this rebellion to kill the whites. Those 45 that were accused, of course, they were hung and they lost their lives. 15 of them were acquitted, but I think they were because they were women and children, and they had no other choice because these people knew nothing. 30 more were convicted, and these people also were beaten and tortured and lost their lives. 18 of them were just hung with no, they just were found guilty, and they just took them out and hung them. And 12 of them who they felt were instigators in this were sold to other states. And let me tell you what happens in the selling of slaves. And this has all happened because of what he did and the rebellion against the slave owners. Whenever things happen that slave owners didn't like, the way they kept you under control was they would threaten to sell your family members off to other plantations, and you never see them again. So it was the way they kept slaves from running away. It was the way that they kept slaves submissive to do whatever they wanted them to do. Because now you're a slave and you're married and you have 3 children, and you run the risk of one of your children being sold off to another state and never ever seeing that child again. And it was done all the time. And the reason it was done is it was tactics, of which we know that this president sitting in office right now has his own tactics. It may be bribery, it may be paying people off, but he has his own tactics as well, a way of keeping the people in control. So the slave owners, when in order to keep you in control, they would sell off your family members. So these 12 individuals that were sold off were probably sold off because they knew that this uprising could happen again. And with such an uprising, they knew that they had to separate the people out so that these things would never happen again. So the thing that I want you to understand and know is now the whites could no longer take these things for granted and say, we have control, they're going to do whatever we tell them to do, because now with this group that rebelled against them and killed some of the people, now they realize and now they know that they're not safe. The president in Uganda right now, he's safe. There's no threats on him. He doesn't feel threatened in any way whatsoever. There's no threats. There's no reason for him to lose sleep at night. Sometimes we need to put fear in people. And I'm not saying go and do something horrific to the president. Cast a stone at his car. It kind of lets him know, who did that? Why did they do that? Why would they treat me this way or whatever? You know what I mean? There's little things that you can do to let him know that you're upset. There's little things that can be done here or there to let you know that you're upset. In the United States of America, we have many ways to let our president know that we're upset at him because he has a tweet account. We can tweet him, or we can send him emails, or we can do things. So we can say, we're not happy with you, and we're upset about this, or why did you do this, or why did you do that? So he knows how we feel because we're given those freedoms. In Uganda, you're not given those freedoms. So what are you doing to get the attention of the president and of the military to say, we don't like this and we don't appreciate what's going on? Many things there's many ways that you can make the president feel a little uncomfortable in his position. We do it all the time to President Barack Obama. I tweet him all the time on little things that I'm concerned with, or things that I'm bothered with, or things that I need more clarity or questions on. So those avenues are out there. The comfort has to be taken away from those who are taking the power away from the people. Yes, there are people that are feeding it and giving it power, the way Nate had people that fed him and gave him the power, and they moved forward to do what they needed to do. But what are you doing to make them uncomfortable so that later on things will change down the road so that they know that you are a threat to them now? If the slaves didn't do anything else but to rise up to say, we are a threat in your society and you need to be careful, that was enough. They put the message out there and they made themselves heard loud and clear. Because of that, they had white ministers from that point forward that went to the churches. All the worship services in the African American church, or in the slave churches, wherever they met to congregate, to have worship, there was a white minister that always had to be present to make sure that they never planned and they never plotted anything again. I imagine that the slaves sat there proud with their shoulders a little higher, because now they're thinking, Oh, so we've made you aware of the fact that we can hurt you just like you hurt us. I imagine that the slaves were very, very proud. I don't think this was a discomfort for them at all. I think this showed them that they had power, powers that would later on be used when Harriet Tubman came along and started freeing slaves. When President Lincoln, who was aware of this because he was a young man in college when all of these things were taking place and happening, he did not stand by Andrew Jackson, who felt that it was okay to own slaves and didn't think anything of it and was very angry about what the slaves did, that he even wrote and had laws changed because of this rebellion against the whites. He had laws changed to protect the whites even farther. So what Mr. Turner did was a great and a wonderful thing, because he brought awareness to the white slave owners that we are not as safe and we are not as hidden and we don't have the rights that we thought we had. And this started to give the slaves more power to say, wow. So what they started doing also is laws were set up that slaves could no longer be educated, because they felt like in educating slaves, this is what happens when you educate them. Doesn't that not sound familiar to what the president is doing to the students there right now at McCary University and some of the other things that are taking place with the teachers and lecturers and all of that? He doesn't care about education because his children are not being educated within the country. And his children are being educated in a better setting than most Ugandans are. So he doesn't care about the education system. He doesn't care if it falls apart, because even so many people have risen up to say that educating the youth is what's going to move Uganda forward. He knows this. He knows the danger of education, because education means these people are reading more. These people are looking more into their history. They're looking more into their governance and how the country is being governed. They're looking to see how other countries are being governed and how their democracies are working. What makes these countries flourish and why are we not flourishing? So you start to get the youth and they start to ask questions as to what's wrong with us and what's going on with us and why are we having these problems and how's the rest of the world living? So even in slavery days, they knew to take away education from the slaves, because if they became smart, they could do these type of things to the whites and catch them off guard again. The president there in Uganda is doing the same thing to his youth. We are not living in a time of slavery. Slavery is over. But is it over in Uganda? You look at the situations here. This is back in the 1800s, and you can pull so much of what is happening out of history as to what is happening in Uganda right now, in the present day. It's a very, very interesting thing of how this, how the same thing is happening. And do we continue to stand by and allow this to happen? The rebellion, and they call these the rebellion laws. And you can go back in history and pull up the rebellion laws and see all the laws that came about because of this one act. And it just was very, very interesting, because you had a lot of slaves that were being educated back then, some that rose up to be some of the greatest leaders in the world. And, and led to others being educated and led to others moving forward. I mean, the fight continued on. It continued on and on and on. And it's very, very interesting that they even had a law where they were not allowed to associate and gather with each other. That's why the ministers were put in the churches, to make sure that they were talking about, they were being spiritual or they were being biblical, because they understood and they knew. It's amazing. Education is an incredible, incredible tool. It is an incredible thing. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break here for 5 minutes. Hopefully my other guests will be back on with me when I come back. But we're going to continue on this conversation, because I'm going to talk about one of the rebellion laws that came up, and it was one that is like the public management bill that was passed there in Uganda. They also had one of those, if you can believe it, back in the 1800s, to keep the blacks, slaves, from socializing together, because when they were in groups, they could be planning ways to attack and hurt and harm whites or their slave owners. So a part of the rebellion laws, that was placed in there also, that they could not gather. Very, very interesting. History is a very interesting thing. We're going to take a 5-minute break here, and we'll be back. You are listening to Miss Brenda here at Freedom at Hand. You are listening to Voice of Uganda Radio, the mouthpiece of all Ugandans, wherever they may be, to voice their problems without fear of any retribution. The Voice of Uganda Radio works in sync with FADU, the Federalist Alliance of Democracy and Development in Uganda. FADU is an organization that was formed to work as a platform for all Ugandans at home and outside, to work synergistically to liberate our mother Uganda from the ruthless invaders that have sucked it dry. Therefore, FADU invites all able Ugandans to act now and save the Ugandan humanity that is being slaughtered, destroyed, and robbed by a few people unworthy to call themselves Ugandans. Many people are crying for action in Uganda as they languish in misery. FADU echoes their cries by making the loudest alarm to everyone to join FADU, not tomorrow or the next day, but today. The number to join is 408-904-7038. The email is info@fadu.org.
Fellow citizens, we call upon you to practice resistance and protest against Museveni. We call upon you to oppose strongly the Museveni government, which is responsible for the downfall of Uganda. It is important to know that Museveni is afraid of the millions of people who are living for that day, for the light of day when Uganda will be liberated from his dictatorial regime. Fellow citizens, it's been 24 years of dictatorship. We should all know that at present our drive for freedom has already grown so strong that Museveni has already begun to change his tactics. We call upon people to participate, to organize silent stand-ins for a free Uganda. We call upon people to demonstrate that we're tired of him. We call upon governments in the United States of America and abroad, people in responsible positions, politicians, only to act in the service of peace, justice, and freedom for Uganda. We call upon people to use all legal and imaginative means and methods in order to ensure peace, justice, and freedom for Uganda. We call upon people from the north and south, from the east and west, and yes, from the central province of Uganda to be loyal to one another. We must preserve our loyalty to human dignity. We call upon people once again not to wait until it is too late to begin thinking about a free Uganda. We call for a new attitude. Arise, fellow citizens, arise. Let us fight for a free Uganda. Museveni must go.
They say history repeats itself, but I say nah, it's people who repeat history. Yeah. Walola byomucholi ngazina maganda, walola byomuganda ngazina kadodo, walola byomugisunga zina entogoro, ngomuchigano munyankore bamukubira endingidi. Ha, nkomye wonko na kodi, akironyo, jermaber, no gambachi, mugambachi, mengoni, kodeyo, nze sifayo boli wakabira chi, sifayo boli wanzikiriza chi, ngambye sifayo obo wagira pate chi. As long as they will love, you're a brother to me. Ntegeragana nemirembe byembagaliza. Peace and understanding is what I wish upon thee. Bwe tulwanagana tubeeranga atakula ensundo, naye bwe tukolagana tuba tusimbye ekikondo. Ah yes, together we stand. Omukulu n'omutayido, omwami n'omukyala,
Thank you so much for staying tuned with me. You are tuned in to Voice of Uganda Radio, and I am Miss Brenda, and you have been listening to Freedom at Hand. We were talking about an iconic leader, Nat Turner, who was a slave back in the 1800s, and just some of the things that he did to, in a rebellious type of way against the slave owners, to bring notoriety and attention to the fact that the slaves were, how the slaves felt about their treatment and what was going on in their lives during that time. You know, we talked about him killing the whites and the white families, and that he killed over 60 whites before the military came and was able to capture him. One of the things I did not share that's very important to know is that back in slavery days, there were a lot of poor people as well as wealthy people. Not everyone was slave owners. You had a lot of whites that were just as poor and treated just as badly as slaves were, because they had nothing and they were poor. And a lot of times they would go to these plantations and ask for work and ask to be able to work to earn money or to have a place to live. And they were considered to be just like the slaves. They would say, you can live with our slaves and you can work with our slaves for food or whatever, just for a place to lodge and live. They never did anything to pull them, you know, up and help them out. So when this rebellion came against the whites and the slave owners, the families that were spared on this plantation in this area where they took over were the poor whites, because the slaves saw the poor whites as being nothing but slaves themselves. The only difference was that their skin was white, but they were treated the same way because they were poor, and they spared these people. And I say that because, you know, it's very important to understand this. I know that everybody working in Parliament, working in the military, working in whatever avenues they're working at in the government in Uganda are not all for this president and do not all stand behind him. I know that to be true. So, but the thing is what are you doing to make the difference? These poor whites, they became like the slaves. And they knew that what that meant. They had no respect. They had nothing. They were seen as second-class citizens, nobodies, just like the blacks were, just like the slaves were. Sometimes people get so comfortable where they're at in life, in their positions, that they don't want to give that up. They don't want to move away from that. They don't want to move aside from that. They want to stay where they're at, in the comfort of where they're at. Sometimes you need to come down to the level of the rest of the people. There's nothing wrong with that. It just shows your loyalty. It just shows that this is not where I'm at. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I support. But we get so comfortable in where we're at in life that we tend to not want to be seen in that way. These people were seen in that way. The poor whites, they said, this is what we are. Could they have gone out and gotten better jobs and done better for themselves? I'm sure they probably could have. But they didn't, and this is what I'm sharing. It. This is, you know, not everybody supports where they're at, but what are you doing? What is your vision? What is your focus? What do you want to see happen? Don't allow that to be taken away by anybody. You know, we have a way of knowing how people should be treated, how people need to be respected, how we all have rights in this world. God put us all here. He didn't make anyone better than anyone else. And we understand and we know morals and we have principles. I mean, we were all raised by mothers and loving families who taught us right and wrong, how you treat people and how you don't treat people. Help when you can help, give when you can give, love when you can love, serve where you can serve. We all know these principles and we know these things to be true, but are we really doing these things? And why do we close our eye or we turn a blind eye when it comes to what's going on in Uganda? Is it because we feel like it's bigger than anything that we can fight ourselves? Well, no one's saying fight anything yourselves. We're saying unite, come a part of a bigger setting of being so that we can figure out how we move forward together. If you were, no matter where you're at in the world, and I know that globally we have listeners all over the globe, If you saw some sort of atrocity or something happening to someone where you live right now today and you knew that you could step in and help, wouldn't you step in and help? I would like to think that we would all do that. We would step in some sort of way to help. But yet when it comes to the Ugandan people, because we're separated out of Uganda, we just kind of are like in our little areas and we're thinking, well, we'll wait and see what someone else is going to do. You know, here at Voice of Uganda Radio, you have a handful of people who were like Nat Turner. You have a handful of people who were like Harriet Tubman. You have a handful of people who are like Dr. Martin Luther King, like Nelson Mandela, and like Gandhi. You have a handful of people who knew that if we put ourselves together and we put our resources together, there's got to be other Ugandans out there that feel the same way that we do. And how do we start to make the message? How do we start to make our voices heard? How do we get out there to those people to say, there are other people out there that feel the same way you do? Was it worth the risk? Were we willing to put ourselves out on that platform and be selfless in everything that we did through our research, through putting things together, through trying to unite people and doing whatever we had to do to bring people together to say, are there others out there? The answer for all of us was, yes, there was. And not only yes, there was, but that we could be the catalyst for change. Let's put our voices out there. Let's put the platform out there. Let's start to have the conversations and not have the conversation of other radio stations. This is the problem. I was not around and was not aware of some of the other things that happened with some of the other radio stations that have been out there and have just stood on a platform that crumbled, that put that same anxiety in the Ugandan people. It takes a lot to trust. It takes a lot to trust. Even with Nate, it took a lot for these men to trust him, stand behind him, and move forward for what they knew that they needed to do. But do we stop trusting just because we've been hurt? Just because something didn't work out our way? Just because something didn't move forward in the direction we wanted it to? What gives us the rights, any of us, even those of us who put this radio station together, what gives us the right to say we have the rights to live and be the way we want to and not worry or be concerned about anyone else because we've been hurt? Have all of us that put this radio station together been hurt, been disappointed, had lost money, lost funds? We all have. Some of the people that even came on this platform to make this happen have lost more money than most Ugandans have lost in the diaspora, because they believed in something so genuinely and they put their heart into it and they gave it all they had and they were hurt. But did that stop them from getting up and trying again? It didn't. It didn't stop Nate Turner. It didn't stop any of the other iconic leaders that I just talked about. You know, when you fall down, you have to get back up and keep going. If you're in a war and you're fighting, when you fall down, you get up and you keep running or you keep moving. You don't lay there and just say, I'll stay here until the war is over to see if I'm one of the ones that live or survive. You get up and you keep moving because it's all about survival. It's all about making it. It's all about change. What is our purpose? What are we fighting for? What are we moving towards? I shared a couple of weeks back about the American people, how we are very giving people. Even though we've heard things when we've given to certain causes that Americans donated millions and all of the money went to administrative things, and only a portion of the money went to the people. Americans gave all this money and the things they wanted to see take place didn't take place, but something else took place. Did that stop the American people from giving money? It never has stopped us. It has never stopped us because we know that the need is still there, and we know what $2 and we know what $5, we know the difference that that makes. As Americans, we also know that we waste $2 every day on, you can go in your change drawer and pull $2 out of your change drawer. We understand and we know these things. it doesn't stop us from still giving to a cause. When there's a horrific storm that happens in Haiti and all of the other places that have had these horrific things, we still come out and we give because it's important to give. Because even if a small portion goes to what we want it to go to, we know that it went to that cause. The people here at Voice of Uganda Radio, the handful of people that put this together, had faith. They trust in what they're doing and they believe in what they're doing. Regardless of what anybody else says or thinks, they knew that this platform had to be put together. They understand and they know the importance of FADU. They understand and know that FADU is the catalyst to get us to where we need to go. FADU opens doors that we cannot open by ourselves. That's why we always encourage you to become a part and a member of FADU. Because FADU opens doors because of a signature of people who stand in the same belief that we do, that helps us to make change. It helps us to make a movement. You have to understand, my fellow Ugandans, it doesn't even matter that you don't live in the United States of America, because quite a few of our FADU members don't even live in the United States. But your signature shows that you're in the diaspora and that you support what we need to do to move forward to make Uganda whole again. So what is your focus and what are you doing? And if you've been hurt by other radio stations and you feel like people haven't moved forward to do what they needed to do, are you even becoming a member of FADU or some other sort of organization that can compile together to make our voices heard on the platforms that we need to have our voices heard? Right now, I'm in the process of setting up some meetings with Senator Coons and some of those that sit on the subcommittee for foreign affairs to see if we can go and talk to them to find out how we in the diaspora can come together for change to help them to help us. And all I'm asking you to do is go out there and put your name on the list and become a part of that movement. See, my fellow Ugandans, we have to be doing something. We cannot just sit aside and do nothing. Because if you sit aside and you do nothing, you say that what's going on in Uganda is okay and you're all right with it. That is what you tell me each and every week, from week to week, when this program airs all weekend long, and those who put themselves and their time out there to make this happen, and all the monies and all the resources that are spent from a handful of people that put this together to make this work, are still funding this and putting money out there and paying for this thing to happen. Because we have to believe that we're not the only ones that think and feel this way. Nat Turner understood and knew if we don't give them something to think about, they're going to think that it's okay for them to continue to do what they're doing. Some would say, was he victorious or not because he lost his life? I would like to say that yes, he was victorious because he started a movement. He started lawmakers to making laws. He started ministers to becoming a part of the black community. He opened the eyes of people who thought that what they were doing nothing was wrong with it. So what are you doing in the diaspora, and what are you doing in the walls of Uganda, and what are you doing wherever you're at? We have Americans that are on board with FADU. FADU.org has an American-based group of people that are signed up as well. We need the diversity. We need it all because the diversity is what helps to make it united and make us strong. It is not just compiled of blacks. And it's not compiled of Ugandans. It's not compiled of African Americans only. But there's whites and there's all sorts of people that are out there being a part. We have people from Ireland and everywhere else that are being a part of FADU and being a part of the movement. Because sometimes when you are in a battle for freedom and liberties and justice and rights of equal rights and opportunities of people who are being tortured and forced to live the way that they're living there in Uganda, it's not just the fight of the Ugandan people. The fight needs to be across the board. And the fight needs to be with Ugandans in the UK, Ugandans in Greece, Ugandans in Germany, in Canada, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, everywhere. The United Kingdoms. The fight needs to be everywhere. So please don't think that because FADU is American-based, to help the Ugandan people, that your signature is not needed on there as well. I have to continue to ask the question, what are you doing? Because this is the question that Nate was faced with. What am I going to do to make change? We have to do something. We can no longer sit still. We can no longer idly stand by and allow this to continue to happen. And now understand the people that he got together to help him with this, they had fear and they had no trust. Because they had to trust one another. And the fact that we trust each other, we stand firm in what we believe so that we move forward to help to bring about a change in the government. Here at the Voice of Uganda, you have a collective group of people that are all different, from different areas in Uganda, from different places within the United States, and even me being an American person here on the platform as well. We needed that diversity because we felt somewhere you would be able to connect with the trust. Somewhere you would connect with someone on the platform, build up a state of trust to come out and be a part of and do what we need to do to move forward. We're not asking you to do what Nate did. We're not telling you to pick up weapons and go out and kill. That's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to become a part of Fadu.org because we know, all of us that live out in the diaspora, we understand the power of petitions. We understand the power of organizations and how they can move things and move people forward. We understand that that's what Washington responds to, and that's what Washington listens to. We understand and we know that to be true. And the great thing is, if those of us that are in the diaspora now connect up with this now, become a part of helping the United States to help us to move forward, that is a beautiful thing because we need those relationships. Because there are a lot of relationships that Uganda has now that we need to make sure that those relationships stay intact. And not only that they stay intact, but they become stronger. So what are you doing to fund that, and what are you doing to make sure that that stays strong? All I'm saying is you've got to start trusting again. You've got to forget about all the hurt. You've got to forget about all the people that have disappointed you. You've got to forget about all the things that you thought were going to get done and move forward. And you've got to start trusting. Even if you trust on a small scale, you've got to start trusting and you've got to start doing something. If Nate Turner did not fight to rebel against the slave owners, to say you can no longer treat us this way and we're not going to take this anymore and you've got to start taking us literally and listening to us, if he did not do that, would we be free in the United States of America? Would there be a Dr. Martin Luther King? Would there be a Rosa Parks? Would there be all of the great iconic leaders, from John F. Kennedy to Abraham Lincoln to all the great people that have stood and helped us to rise higher and higher and higher in the fight? So, we got to understand that there has to be a trust somewhere. And even if your trust is only very, very small, trust us on that small scale as we prove ourselves to get to that bigger scale. But don't condemn us in the waters before we ever have a chance to excel and show you what this program is all about and how this program is moving forward and the differences that we're trying to make. I mean, we've even brought on leaders in Uganda. The former vice president was on one of the shows and spoke out and talked about some of the things and answered some of your questions, which, by the way, because he was making his rounds here in the United States, I had a chance and an opportunity to meet him and listen to some of the things he had to say and the platform that he's standing on for change. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I really was very honored to meet him and to listen. Now, we know that he's been a part of a government that has done some horrific things. But this is what I say about the trust factor and when that comes into play again. I've got a caller, so I'm going to go ahead and put this call on in. So, caller, are you there?
Hello, Mr. Brenda.
Dorothy, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you. I get caught up somewhere, and I'm terribly late, but I have been listening, and I have been really following. I do appreciate the great education, encouragement, and all these good examples that Ms. Brenda, you keep bringing to us, because the Ugandan people need to realize. All of what I'm getting out of this program today is that people who stood up and did right and did what they are supposed to do, their life, their time, their energy, whatever it did not go in vain. Changes were brought up, things changed, but for us in Uganda we have one thing that has been going. Unless we do get up and do as Mr. Turner did, and do as Rose Parks did, and do as Harriet Tubman did, we need to realize that people get comfortable. Mr. Turner had to wake up, the white people. He had to send a message that, you don't get so comfortable because what you are doing to us is not right. He might have lost life, he might have lost his people, he might have lost here and there, but they got the message and changes were made. From South Africa, Gandhi, whenever, all of those lessons. So, as I have been listening this morning, we need to get up and send our message stronger and clear. For me, this is what I get. There is nothing for Ugandans in the Ugandan government today. There is no offer, and do not dream. Nothing for the Ugandan people. So what I'm asking is, please don't stand back and ask, what have you done? What are you doing? Who is the, how, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have that? There is no magic. Fadu, they are regular Ugandans who wake up and go put straight in their cards and work their shifts and come back home and do what they're supposed to do. Volunteer work for the sake of Uganda. They don't have much. They are struggling like everybody else. But the idea of sitting back and do research, we open that organization, how far do you stand here, how far do you stand there, what are the qualifications? As you already know, Voice of Uganda Radio and FADU, it is one entity. And we also wish to tell you that we are pretty young. We've been in existence about 5-6 months. But please, Uganda needs us. Some of the questions that you are asking, my sense is that you maybe know better. Because we need help from each and everybody. There is so much to do. We can't sit here and lie to you that, we are how many members and we can do each and everything. No, we need everybody's ideas. We need everybody's help. Please, ladies and gentlemen, as you sit back to ask, it is high time that you join FADU and get involved and get to know how things are rolling. Because if you stay on the sideline, you'll never know. Okay? So, we need the help, we need the donations, we need the manpower, we need your brains, we need everything. Don't sit on the sideline and start to ask ABCD, I wanted to donate this amount of money, but I need to know ABCD. Please come to FADU, because Uganda needs us. Mr. Turner stood up for what was right. People followed. So, all of what I hear from Miss Brenda is, we need to send our message strong and clear, but we need each other. We need unity. We are strong together. Please don't sit on the sideline and you require and demand all these qualifications. It will be better for you to come and we work together. We have put everything we think that is needed. The website is there. Everything that the people call, what should we do, what is the next step, well, we need to register and become FADU members. And we start from there. But this idea of sit and listen and demand ABCD is not taking us anywhere. Please don't sit back. There is no magic. Nobody has all the solutions. We need everybody. I understand. We cannot. Yeah.
Dorothy, because don't you think one of the things that's tying in what you're saying, you don't physically have to be here to make a difference. But signing up for these programs makes you present no matter where you're at in the world.
Exactly. As you were saying, that people who knows the use of the organization, people will get to know FADU, how many members, okay? If you go on FADU and sign in, you are already there. You are participating. That is one step ahead, okay? This is the time where we have technology, where things happen. No matter what, it doesn't matter where you are. Now I hear Ms. Brenda have been advertising for the children of Uganda, for the youth, for the students to go and register on FADU so that they can participate in these essays, so that they get the education they need to know what is right and wrong. As we all know that people of Uganda, the citizen, everything they are getting is, I don't even, it is even second hand. But ladies and gentlemen, you can do whatever you are, but you can still be a great value to FADU and our motherland, Uganda. Okay? Mr. Turner, when he started doing whatever he was doing, when he started thinking, when he started planning, he had no idea how far this is, that whole movement would go. But you believe it or not, it did make a lot of changes. What I'm saying is, people, we tend to sit back and say, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to contribute to this? The thing is, you don't know. You do not know. You do not know even what you have before you start. So please come on board, come along. FADU is doing everything that they can do to make sure that they reach everybody. But they do not have all the answers. And we need each and everybody. If you ask how much have you done, what organization, who do you are in contact, what is ABC, maybe you are better off help us how to do that. Because some of these things are about to contact.
Yeah, and
we don't know everything, yes.
Yeah, and those that are in the diaspora, I did a program on the American Connection, on the power of those in the diaspora and how the United States government are starting to look to have those relationships so they can figure out how they can better work with their countries at home. So one of the things I don't even think Ugandans realize is the power they have right now. It's one thing when you didn't have the power and you're just a few people that were angry at the government and things were going on. But now, with all of the research, all the studies that are going on, all the things that the United States government is doing to connect with those in the diaspora, the power that's being placed in your hands is amazing. And what are you going to do with that power that's being given to you? Are you going to give it back and say, no, thank you, or are you going to use it? And I think that's one of the things that Nat Turner did. He didn't just sit by and say, well, I'll wait for somebody else to do it because what if this happens or that happens or whatever. I mean, sometimes you've got to take the role and be the leader. But one of the things I am saying is right now the United States government is paying very, very close attention to Uganda. They're paying very, very close attention to growth opportunities. They are looking at those in the diaspora because of all of the monies that are being flooded into Uganda that's keeping the economy afloat. I mean, they're looking at a lot of those things because if those in the diaspora in Uganda, the Ugandan diaspora, if they were not sending money into Uganda, it would collapse. The United States government knows that the only reason that Uganda is still afloat, still doing as well as it's doing, and making the progress along that it is because of those in the diaspora that are sending money into Uganda weekly, making the difference and helping the economy to grow. So there is no other way than to just say it, and that is that the power that you hold in your hands right now is greater than anything you know. And if you don't do something with that power that you have right now, it will eventually be taken away from you, dissipate, or be gone. So you've got to funnel that power somewhere. And what we are asking you to be a part of is not rocket science here. It's just making a difference towards change. I say it again, if Nat Turner did not do what he did, would we be free as African Americans in the United States today? There may have been other iconic leaders to rise up and take his place. There may have been other iconic things to happen along the way, but it started somewhere. And even though that somewhere was very small, this man, who has been dead for centuries, would be amazed that his name is on the lips of African American people with thanks and gratitude for his selflessness to move forward to make a difference. Did he know that he would still be living all of these years later in the hearts and in the minds of people? Probably not. But these are the things we're saying, you never know how important your impact is, because we don't have all the answers, but you never know how important what you have to say, what you have to share, and what you have to bring to the table is, unless you stand out there and become a part of it. I mean, laws were rewritten because of this man, because of the rebellion law, and it's called the rebellion laws. But one of the things were that several states prohibited education, several states prohibited blacks being free, because there was a point in time where some slave owners were so loyal to their slaves that when they told them, in my death, you will be free. A lot of those things were taken away, and education were taken away, and they restricted the rights of assembly and other civil rights from blacks. Assembly is exactly what they're doing there in Uganda now. So his impact, he had no idea the impact of what he was doing when he set out to do it. We don't even know what will happen even here with Voice of Uganda Radio and Fadu later on, and the impact that it may be making today. And the fact that we want everyone to be a part of that. One of the things I share a lot is the NAACP, the National Alliance Association for Colored People here in the United States of America. That organization is so big that when they send something to the floor to be heard, or they have a concern, it's read, it's debated, it's talked about because of the power in which it holds, because of the signatures and the people that stand behind it. That's why we put Fadu out there so much and say become a part of it, because the power that it will hold and the doors that it will open for everyone will just be absolutely amazing. Because even when Uganda falls under a new government, which we know that it will happen, even when they fall under a new government, it's going to be great for that government to tie itself back here in the United States in a great way. When students start wanting to come out of the country to study and there's problems, and why are they not letting the students out when the credentials are there? Because right now there are so many Ugandan students that there are some that are given the rights to come out and study, but there are a lot of students that get scholarships to come out of Uganda and study, and they're not allowed to come out of the country. Fadu needs to be that backing in the United States for many, many reasons. It may be the catalyst right now to move us forward for justice, but it will also stand as a platform to connect us to the United States of America in a strong and a powerful way, that our voice will be heard in that connection on the the African Foreign Affairs Committee. So, I hate to think what would have happened with my life had he not stepped forward and did what he did. Well, how do you feel about that part, even, Dorothy, that education was taken away from people? They no longer educated, and we know that this is happening in Uganda right now, that this president could care less about the education system there in Uganda.
The thing is, Miss Brenda, so, as you know, the government of Uganda, their agenda is really long, is wide. These are things that they had what they called, they call it, they had some kind of name they gave it, some kind of a plan. So they started debated about this for, as they said, they want to be in Uganda for 50 years. They mean this. So the thing is, if you want to go somewhere and take over the country, what do you do for the citizens of that country? You have to deny them their rights. What did the whites do? They realized that when they tried to educate the blacks, they became wise and they knew exactly what to do with them. So what do? You keep these people ignorant, okay? You take away everything so that you can do whatever you want to do with them. So make this clear. This is no different with the government of Uganda right now. If they think that the children of Rwanda and whatever else and whenever Rwandans were that they are trying to come back to Uganda and call it home, the same way they are doing it to Congo, they have got to make sure that they have to find a way of dominating the real citizens of Uganda. So what do? They have sent their children abroad, they get the best of education, they have erased away the education in Uganda, okay? So that when time comes, when Museveni is done with his 50 years and these new young generations that to come, the real Ugandan citizens have no way to stand up, they have no way to compete, they don't have nothing, all the privileges have been denied, they are not educated, where they are not going to participate in anything. Okay, so that is where they are aiming at. Okay.
Yeah.
They are not going to defeat us. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about the article that just came out? I think it came out in the Observer yesterday on Miriam Makeba about some of the things that she had to say about the students.
That woman. You are talking about this ESIC, who used to be the ESIC prime minister in Uganda?
Yeah, because she was.
This is what I keep. Yes, yeah. This is where it comes in play. The people of Uganda, both abroad and back home, we have to realize. You know, Miss Brenda, when Museveni came to power, is as arrogant as he is, as he has done so many things, but a lot of people had, they expected a lot. They didn't know that they had their, hidden agenda. And it took a while for some people to realize that. But most people were on board. Most people loved him. People supported him. You know, people looked to him as a change. Not knowing that he's been a problem all along since the 1970s, trying to get to power to make sure people hated the previous government. So most people had no idea. But what I'm getting to is that many people supported him. Many people have been part of the movement. But during the first 5 years, people realized that this is not what they had signed before. As you know, some people, it took them very, very long. Other people like over 25 or 30 years. Other people, it took them just 2-3 years to realize this, and they had to make a move. So, Matembe was in Museveni's government, but time came and she realized that this is not what I had signed up for, okay? Yeah. This is not what it is that we wanted. This is nothing on the 10-point program that we came with, okay? So many people have died. You know, great colonels, army leaders, people who had a dream for Uganda, people who gave up their life like Mr. Turner, and they, so they realized that this is not it. So Matembe has been very vocal, and he says it as it is, okay? For me, I really appreciate the youth of Uganda. We have to understand that you are the leaders of today. You have waited for 30 years. If you think Museveni is going to give up the power, you are joking, because he had told you this point blank. Okay? So Matembe, what she's calling for is telling the youth, one college after another, that listen to the youth, you will have to use your own power. Okay? In order, you need to fight for Uganda, because Uganda is yours. You are the future of Uganda. What does it mean you have to use your own power? So, Mr. Museveni said that he came to the power by the use of a gun. A mere paper will not get him out of power. And that has proved to be true. He has done that many, many times. So, Matembe, I'm so proud of her. Yeah. People, they have supported the movement, they were part of it, but some people have woken up. And they know what is the right thing to do for Uganda. So she's just encouraging the youth to do the right thing. Please wake up. You're going to have to wake up and use your own power to get rid of this man, because the man is out of reality, okay? So those who think that they're going to keep begging, because he seems to have a key to everything. Miss Brenda, you mentioned about the MOPs, okay? I think they should try to test the waters, the way the teachers have been doing, the doctors and the nurses, and everything. Because the man holds their allowances a few days and then they start starving and they give in to everything. But what are you doing in the parliament for the first place? One bad bill after another, okay? So, Matembe is the way to go. That's what we need. That's what the youth need to understand. That's where FADU comes in, okay? Youth programs, education, all that. People have to know their rights. Information is power. So, Miss Brenda, for me, I am up for Miss Matembe. She must have, maybe some few mistakes in the back, but I'm up for that because I think that seems to be the solution.
Well, exactly, because one of the things she did is she stepped down for the term limits. She refused to, to be a part of that because it would keep him in power forever. She also went on to say that, this man has all of these advisors, almost 100 advisors, and yet the development aspects of the country are still ranking very low. She talked about all of the advisors he has, and she says, is it just that he's not listening to them, or are they not being leaders? And I think it's a little bit of both. I think they're not being the leaders they should be, and that he's still not listening to them even when they decide to stand up against him. But, they have to continue to fight. They have to continue. Because what's going to happen, Dorothy, is I believe that a little bit of inconvenience now will go a long, long way later. Because with all of these laws and these, and when you start tampering with your Constitution almost on a monthly basis, that is really not good. I mean, that was years and years of people putting these things together to make sure it works for all the people. And when you allow a person to come in and tamper with it as much as he has, it loses its value. It's not even worth the paper that it's written on when those type of things start to happen, because it doesn't work for the country anymore. It only works for the individual that continues to mandate all these changes and all these things happen. So I commend her a lot, too, because she was a lot like, in her thinking, like Nat Turner was. You have to stand up. You have to make a change. You have to say what needs to be said, because he's getting his power from somewhere. And I believe that his power is coming from the people, the Ugandan people, the parliament. Because if they step aside and they refuse to vote on these things and decide we will live with the discomfort, we will find our way, they take his power away, he will not have a lot to move him forward. So they continue to move him forward by the decisions they continue to make by being there. And everybody needs to have a little bit of discomfort, because just like he holds their allowances away, like you were just saying, he holds their allowances away for a little bit and they come back on their knees and they're ready to do anything that he wants them to do. Well, they need to realize that someday he's not going to give it to them, no matter how much they beg. So it's just a matter of time. All of it is just a matter of time as to when it's going to all fall apart. I've talked a lot about the budget there in Uganda and how it doesn't make sense, and how there's no way the numbers and things that they put forth are going to carry through true to the end of that budget year. And for this to be in the news and that the government is running out of money, these are the things that are going to start to happen. But these are the decisions that are based on one man. And then he looks for other people to drop the blame on. But all of this is at his hands. Other people are not making these decisions that are causing all these problems for the country. He's making these decisions that are causing all these problems for the country. And then he's blaming the very people that are put in office to defend that. I'm going to let you go ahead and comment on that, and then I'm going to close us out because we're here at the end. But go ahead and comment on that.
Miss Brenda, that is the most painful thing. If Ugandans, if people don't wake up, we need to drop this saying that, every man is for himself and God for us all, because this is what the members, the MOPs, this is what they have been doing. Okay? So, For Mr. Museveni, he has a list, and he has a list of priorities. All along when he wanted to pass these bills, because Miss Brenda, he has passed all the bills that you can think about. To me, I don't think there's any other bill that he needs to pass. Okay? So, when he needed them and used them, he put them this comforty, gave them whatever they need. Now they are used to it. They seem like they can't live without it, right? Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, this idea of holding their allowance, because we don't even know. Because the money this time has been all the sectors, all the departments, they don't have no money. But remember that thank God, people like Miss Brenda and all those brave Ugandans who have written, donors, they have cut aids to Uganda. And thanks to those strong Rwandese and Congolese who stood up for their rights so that the government of the US did cut the army aid to Rwanda and all of that. So yes. Remember that Mr. Museveni and Mr. Kagame, they are the ones in Congo. So Miss Brenda, these MPs, their maybe party might be also over as the rest of the Ugandans. They have been suffering because now when he looks at his list, he thinks that what am I going to do in Congo here? We need help. I need to support my rebel groups over there. And where do I look? Because the man is taking one loan after another. Remember, for the ID scan, they took 300 billion. They can't even account for that money. Now they ask for another 5 billion, Miss Brenda. So they are looking at this as a way of stealing, even when we talk about the advisors, because more questions are arising out of this. You can imagine what kind of advisors get paid so much. Is this the kind of advice they are giving to the president? Public management bill, culture leader bill? I mean, what is this? Because some people, they are saying that they are named for keeps. Because let me tell you, a month, these advisors take home $702 million. A year, they take $8 billion. Is their names listed down for the sake of another way of getting money, scandalizing Ugandan taxpayers, or what? So we have so many questions. But for the sake of MPs, I think they need to wake up and join the rest of the Ugandans, and they do the right thing instead of staying in the parliament and making Museveni's government legitimate, because this is no magic. There are certain things Museveni can't do for himself. If there is no opposition, the parliament, the government is not legitimate, there is nothing in standing. So thank you very much, Ms. Brenda.
Oh, thank you so much, Dorothy, and thank you so much for being a part of the second half of the program. I always appreciate you and what you have to contribute to the program. Just feeding off a little of what Dorothy was saying there, she's absolutely right, and I've said it. He's being given power by the people in Parliament, and somewhere they're going to have to stand up and rise against that. She's also right in saying that not only did the U.S. cut the funding that they're giving Uganda right now, but some other countries are cutting their funding. And that money has to come from somewhere, because those military fights are very, very expensive. And if he has to take it from the people, he will take the money from the people, because he's all about military, he's all about the war, and he's all about fighting. The more his funds get cut, because when there is a reason to believe that there is corruption, most governments will shut down and shut away from it, because they cannot explain to their constituents in their countries where this money is going if they're given this much money and these type of things are happening. So I said it at the beginning of the program, and I'll say it again. He is going to be the downfall of himself. He is going to destroy himself, because when he no longer has the money and the funds to continue the journey in the direction in which he's been going, he won't survive. He will not survive. I thank you all so much, and I hope that this program today has been really uplifting and really moved you closer to knowing that freedom is at hand. Freedom is at hand for every Ugandan. Freedom is at hand for those who are looking forward to going back home to Uganda someday, whether it be to retire or start a business or move back home or whatever. But, freedom starts with us. And what are we doing? Are we getting on board? Are we involved? Go to padu.org, become a member. Donate money to Voice of Uganda Radio wherever you can, even on a small scale, because trust comes in a small package until it grows and proves itself. If you don't allow someone to prove what they're about and what the direction they want to head for the country, then you'll never know. If Nat Turner didn't make that decision on that day, stayed in his sphere, cared only about himself and his family, was not about change, was not about changing the way people viewed and felt about the emotions and feelings of other people, where would we be today as African Americans? Thank you so very much for being tuned in this morning for the first show here on Voice of Uganda Radio. We have another show that's waiting right in the wings after me, so I'm going to sign out saying thank you so much for being a part of the program, and I look forward to my listeners on the American Connection on Wednesday here on Voice of Uganda Radio. Have a great Sunday.
They say history repeats itself.